4, and we are here at the Beaver Creek Chamber of Commerce studio. My name is Mary McKinley, and I am the Public Outreach Coordinator for the Greene County Record Center and Archives. Off screen, we also have Robin Heiss, the Archivist and Records Manager for the Greene County Record Center and Archives. Would you care to introduce yourself?
My name is Jeffrey Shaw.
All right. Can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to Xenia?
Yeah, I'm my mom's family, Greene County since early 1800s. So I was born in Jamestown, Ohio, like a lot of my peers. Both my parents were born at home, so being born in Haynes Hospital, it was actually a house. Dr. Linton delivered me. My parents actually lived in Springfield and drove to Jamestown to have me. So I have two sisters that were born 3 years and 5 years after me. And my parents moved from Springfield to Xenia near where the Ohio fishing game place. We rented a home, and I was 4 years old. And my mom was pregnant with my last sister, Carla, and went through the winter, and my mom did not want to live in this farmhouse that had horrible cold, and we had an outhouse. We had an indoor pump. We took baths in the tub. So we actually lived in a house that had a bathroom inside before. So we moved to Lanewood, 1037 Parnell Drive, Lanewood 1, across from Cox Elementary School. And I was 5. I entered kindergarten at Cox. So I have the two sisters, Gail and Carla. My mom, Jim and Stella Shaw. Mom was from Bowersville, and my father had moved to Bowersville, and his parents were, we'll call them Kentucky tenant farmers initially, but he got a job eventually with NCR. So I grew up in Xenia, lived there until 1981. We lived on Parnell Drive until 1972. We moved into a house on the other side of the city. So I was going to Warner Junior High, 7th and 8th grade, and went to Central Junior High in the 9th grade, and got to walk to school as opposed to a bus to Warner. And there's an L-shaped ranch house on 627 Saxony Drive. We lived in that house for 18 months and got blown away.
So how old were you when the tornado occurred?
So I was in the 10th grade. Our high school was right there across from Shawnee Park. So I was 15, soon to be 16. A lot of my friends that already were driving. You get your license when you're 16, so I wasn't able to drive yet. So I used to just ride all over town. My dad had a cabinet shop on Miami Avenue by the railroad tracks, J&S Cabinet Company. Made kitchen cabinets and bathroom cabinets. So my mom worked for Sears, Roebuck. She started off at the catalog store right there off Allison Avenue, and she got transferred to downtown Dayton. And she was actually at the Dayton Mall. She worked for the credit part of Sears. She called my sisters that day of the tornado, and I was at the track. So that day was a normal, school day. Me and my friends, we always, those of us who did not drive, we walked to the track from the high school. So we walked to, Cox Elementary. The track is right behind Cox. And we had a track meet the day before, and we had a track meet scheduled for that Thursday. And so we had a real light practice. It actually had rained a little bit as we came inside, and one of our track mates left his spikes, his shoes, his spreading shoes out at the track. So he had run out. It was Tracy Wilson. He ran out and saw the tornado and come running in, screaming that there was a tornado. Our coach was Bill Wilson, the mayor of Xenia at the time. He was a teacher at Xenia High School. And there's probably 55, 60 of us. The girls track team had already left. So so they were not there. Basically, we took, the lights went out, took cover. Most of us had already gotten close to being dressed. Coach Wilson had taken the door for underneath the track bleachers was it didn't have a handle, it just had a hole, and you padlocked the door. So it wasn't a key, it was just a door that they had not put a handle in, and they used a padlock. And so he took a shovel, put it through the hole, and he was holding the door, because you couldn't padlock the door. So he was there, and so after the tornado, during the tornado, it was very loud, like a train. It was surreal. We didn't get to see the tornado because we're underneath the bleachers, but it popped some of the corrugated metal off of the sides, and we got a little bit of light, and the noise was louder. But when we came out, he was concerned about the wires on the stadium lights had all come down, and so he was out there with a shovel beating on them to see if there was live wires. And so at that point, we started hearing sirens, because we're right there by 35. And so across from there is the bowling alley and Kaler's, the furniture place. And we could hear people kind of yelling and screaming a little bit. I think it was more just kind of emotional, because they'd blown the windows out. There's a little strip shopping center across there. And but everybody's kind of taking their own look at what happened. And we're starting to hear emergency vehicles come down, and he wanted us to move our pole vault pit and our high jump pit had blown up against the fence, so he wanted us to move it back. So our team, we all moved it back, and then the guys that had cars, they saw their cars had been literally kind of like sandblasted. It had taken stripped the paint off. So we were at the side of the tornado where it didn't. It was really probably another 100, 200 yards to I guess it would be south where we were at. And they're all freaking out, but me and my friend, we walked. And so as we're going down Dayton Xenia Road, there's like a little hill, and we're seeing people come back up that had been in the tornado. There was a foundry back, I don't know, it's close to where the railroad tracks come. What is that, West Street? I think West Street, you go left and there's a foundry, and the foundry guys that were coming up, because that had hit the area somewhat, and we didn't really understand, because they were all dirty looking, but no electricity. And right at the bottom of Dayton Xenia, where it is the A&W root beer stand and the railroad tracks, and Kroger's across from the railroad tracks. And that's when things got really weird, because me and my friend were being called to help some people that were trapped in the house beside the railroad tracks. And it's so hard to imagine people yelling to help them, and the house is literally destroyed, and they were on the second floor, and we did not go through a door or stairs. We climbed up the side of the thing, and there was a couple in bed. They had been in bed that afternoon. Of course, in the 10th grade, you're thinking, well, good for them. But there was train cars everywhere. They had been strewn off the tracks. And that's where it started getting really bizarre. My friend, Johnny Harshbarger, his dad had a place downtown that he worked at, and so we separated at that point. So we were together, and right after we did helped the couple out of the bed, it just got weirder, because I still had to go probably about 1.5 miles to my house. And so I think it's Market Street and 2nd Street. So basically, I started going over trees. I mean, these big, huge trees, because these were old homes. So you're going over these trees, and of course, this is before they cleared anything. And by the time I got to Church Street and Detroit Street, you have Shawnee Park and our old high school. And you're seeing this, and you smell some natural gas. You hear people yelling and talking. And as I went by, because to get to my house, the road was Marshall, and it goes straight back into Pinecrest Gardens. And so I had to go by between the high school and the field house, and that's where they kept the buses. The buses, after they run, the buses were there. There's buses everywhere. And I look at the high school, and the second level is gone. It just, it was weird. And so I'd gone down Marshall, and by the time I got home, I literally, because I had to cross to a yard. I didn't go all the way on the street. I went between houses, and I got to my street, and I was going up and down, and my dad had come home, because my sisters they were latchkey kids. I mean, they were in the 7th and 5th grade, and so my mom had called them from the mall, the Dayton Mall, and told them about the hail, that turn on the TV, see what's happening. So fortunately for them, they had that little bit of warning, and they looked out and they saw the tornado. The younger one knew it was a tornado. The other one thought it was a big flock of birds. She goes, "That's really weird." And so they got down in the hallway. By the time my dad had come from, he had to be on foot. He got from this Miami Avenue, so you go up 42 downtown until he had a good couple, probably 2.5, 3 miles before he could get to the house. And so he had gotten there and found out that my sisters had been gathered. They took the latchkey kids and gathered them at the other end of the neighborhood that had not been hit. And so he made sure they're all right. So my, I see him and I'm like, "Where's our house?" He goes, "Your sisters are all right. Where's your grandpa and grandma's house? Where did it get hit?" And so they lived on Robert Lane. They weren't hit, but at the time I had only seen everything that had been hit. So I told him, "Well, it's all gone." At that point I was pretty out of it. And so he did run about, I think it sounds like a mile maybe. He got downtown and they told him that part had not been hit. So at that time I waited, and we had some neighbors. We helped another gal that was in she had gotten in the bathtub and had a mattress over top of her. And you get this now, this is probably 30, 45 minutes after the tornado. She still had not gotten out of the bathtub because she's elderly. And so we helped her get out of the bathtub, and at the same time what I heard, it was her son. So she must have been like in her 80s, and he was like in his 60s. And by then he was able to drive. So they had cleared off some of the streets, so he was able to drive in. And they ended up having to take him out with her. He was in shock too. So I don't think he got hurt, but I stepped on a nail as usual. I mean, I got all the way across town, never stepped on a single nail at home. You start looking for your stuff, thinking, my bedroom, believe it or not, it was at the center of the house, and other than a broken window, a little bit of insulation, there wasn't much wrong with our room. But the roof from across the street had come over and hit our garage. So our garage, pretty much everything was gone in the garage. In the house, it kind of caved in the front, and then the part of the L shape that had the bedrooms in it, the front 2 bedrooms had caved in. Unfortunately, my sisters had gotten the hallway, so their bedroom was destroyed. My bedroom beside it was across from the bathroom, and so those were the only 2 parts of the house. It was really in the back of the house. It kind of caved in. Our house was demolished, and we built another house. So what? I could keep going on.
Do you remember what you thought when you first saw the house?
Well, I couldn't find it at first. Right. What I thought, I had an aquarium at the time, with fish in it. It's so weird how you just, you'd look at the things that, they had a bunch of debris and stuff. It didn't get knocked down, but the fish, they died relatively soon after, because you know, it was immaterial, but I remember how it stuck out in my mind, like, you know, because that was kind of the center part of the L. My sisters, I got to see eventually. We ended up going to my grandparents' house that wasn't hit, and stayed there until we got an apartment. What house-wise, it wasn't as bad as some, but it wasn't structurally, you know, fixable. Believe it or not, the house beside us on both sides, they were intact enough to actually redo them. Now, they didn't have to rebuild, but the houses, all the houses behind us had to be rebuilt. So it was odd because the houses across the street all had to be rebuilt. So why those two houses? Because we were kind of on a little hill, and for whatever, I think it was because the roof had come across and hit our house. But if you're familiar with Saxony, you're probably not familiar with Saxony Drive, at the end it had a little, what do you call it, cul-de-sac. It had hill at the top. And so the stadium heights was actually on a hill, and we were kind of down below that. And behind Pinecrest Gardens, there's two. Our street, Saxony, is the first, and there's two more streets. And there was some deaths on Doral Drive. A poor babysitter took the kids and her into a garage. So we felt very fortunate because, you know, my sisters did whatever, you know, they were told to do at the time. I don't know how much tornado training you got, but yeah, they did pretty good. Yeah, friends, you know, houses got hit. We'd only lived there a year and a half, so I didn't know the people as well as I knew on the other end of town. I lived 10 years on Parnell. What else?
If we go back a little bit to when you were sheltering in the school during the tornado.
I was in the track.
Oh, track, sorry. Yes.
Underneath the bleachers. It's at the football field. So you have the track around the football field. So that track, they did refinish here recently. Doug Adams track, but Cox they rebuilt. So that school did not get hit, but the track and bleachers did. So the stadium lights had got bent over. So we were right at the edge, and really very fortunate because it had probably been 200 or 300 more yards north. Who knows? I mean, you didn't have much protection. All we had was concrete block base and then corrugated steel, which a lot of bleachers, you know, just the dressing rooms for the football team. Yeah, it was loud. And so everybody you talk to is always, it sounds like a jet engine, is, you know, if you don't get to see it. So I did not get to see the tornado technically. You can see out the little holes, but yeah.
Do you remember anything about that evening? Where did you go? You went to your grandparents' house.
Yeah, we went to my grandparents' house, and apparently there was another warning, because that was kind of a supercell thing that day, and there's tornadoes in Cincinnati, so very similar to what we had here in Dayton a few years ago, where there's multiple tornadoes, and so a lot of people were kind of freaked out. We didn't have electricity at my grandparents' house that night. I think they did get it restored by the next day. You know, I'd been to my grandparents' house. They lived at the edge of what we call Lanewood 2. So Dayton Xenia Road separated Lanewood 1, Lanewood 2 was across the street, and they lived what would have been probably a 1950s house. So it was an older, much bigger yard. So they had plenty of room for us initially. And then my dad had an apartment complex that he was able to get an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment for us.
You mentioned your dad walked home. Was there a car? Why was he?
He drove as far as he could drive it.
Okay.
So basically from Miami Avenue. So again, if you're familiar with Xenia, Miami Avenue crosses Cincinnati Avenue, which is 42, and there is Hoover and Allison was a rope factory, and so we were on the other side of the track, same side of the tracks as Hoover and Allison, but you had to cross the tracks, take Cincinnati Avenue back up into downtown. So I don't know, he didn't tell me exactly where he left he had a station wagon at the time, and he abandoned it and then had to go by foot. So he was relatively young. My parents were very young when they had us. So at the time, let's see, I would have been 15. He would have been 35. So he was 20 years older than me.
Okay. And he was the one, he was with you and took you to your grandparents.
Well, yeah. My sisters, my mom actually was able to drive. By the time she got home from Dayton, they let the people that worked outside of Xenia come back in, and so she was able to drive. Get this now, my mom had a person that drove from Cedarville to our house, parked her car in our driveway, and then drove to the Dayton Mall with her. I guess kind of like what do you call that?
Carpooling?
Carpooling, yeah, that's it. Always think of those places for the mass transit in big cities. So they carpooled. Her car was in our driveway. She was actually able to drive that back to Cedarville with 4 flat tires. I mean, basically, by the time she got out of the neighborhood, all of them were flat. But she went ahead and drove it because she just drove slow. And Cedarville, of course, had been hit too. So it took her a while to get there. But my mom got to there, and I assumed that we must have went in her car. I don't really remember much at that point. I remember later days, getting free sandwiches. The Red Cross was there. But yeah, I guess I was probably still in shock at that point. It didn't seem as important, that trip to my grandparents.
I was just curious when your mother met up with you guys and where.
I don't, again, it's weird. I remember my dad, seeing him, but the rest of that night was kind of a blur. I mean, I just know that we were happy that we were together.
You remember the Red Cross passing out food.
Yeah, over the next week or two, they're coming in and helping people because, they had martial law at night, so you couldn't be there, and during the day you'd come and get your stuff. Believe it or not, that was the Wednesday before our spring break. So we had school spring break, and we went to school the following week.
Huh.
That's how efficient people could be back then. So we went to Beaver Creek. I went to Beaver Creek High School at night from 3 to 8.
What about your sisters?
Sisters went to a Beaver Creek Elementary School. So we used almost all the Beaver Creek schools. And people just, so the high school people got bused to the high school, middle school people got bused to the I think they had 2 middle schools, and same thing with the elementary. Now there was 2 schools that weren't damaged bad enough that I think some of those kids were still able to go. But if you read about the tornado, the majority of our schools were damaged. So a lot of bus. As a matter of fact, we didn't just use, because a lot of our buses were damaged. So these weren't just Xenia buses. These were actually other schools. I kept that schedule. My classmates are like, because I posted it, they're like, "You kept that?" Well, I lost all my other stuff. So it was, the beginning of my new collection, I guess. All my grade school, all my sisters, all our grade school stuff was all gone because we stored it in the attic above the garage. Pictures. Yeah.
So a lot of your possessions were lost at the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you remember? You said, I just have to ask. You had a nail in your foot.
It poked me. It
Okay.
went through my shoe.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't horribly damaged. I got a tetanus shot.
That was. Do you remember where you were when you got the tetanus shot?
I think it's the Red Cross. I mean, if I remember right, because the hospital was so busy with all the other things, they were just because people had minor injuries, they were giving out tetanus shots. So it's like getting a flu shot. Everybody's getting a tetanus shot.
How were your local friends and family affected? You mentioned one you were with on the day.
Yeah, so Johnny Harshbarger, he ended up not graduating with our class. He ended up moving to another school. We lost about 20% of our classmates moved away. So we would have graduated close to 650 students, and it ended up being, I think, 535 or something like that. Yeah, two of my classmates, good friends of mine, were in the bowling alley across the street.
Wow.
They didn't get hurt significantly. They didn't. The gal that I'm with now, Vicky, she was in the ditch on 35. She's only about 300 yards from me. I didn't know it at the time. When you hear the story, she was babysitting, and she was actually in the house in the hallway like you're supposed to be. That house did not get hit, but it was just west and north of where the area's hit. And a guy came and told her that they should get out of the house and get into a ditch. And as she was taking these three kids into the ditch, a highway patrol guy had come, and he had gotten out of his car and got into the ditch with them.
Wow.
So again, you'd have to hear her story, but I didn't really find out until much later about that, because we weren't a couple at the time. So I have friends that lived in Lanewood that saw the tornado, and they came out, I mean, you can only do so much. I mean, they just, come out and kind of stare, and we did not know, Johnny and I, when we went by A&W Route Near Stand, we did not know about there was ambulances and stuff there, but we were so focused on helping the couple get out of the bed. But going over those trees, the big, huge down trees, was impressive. And people got in there with chainsaws and stuff and got roads cleared pretty quick. I mean, my mom probably got to the house, I think the tornado was 4:30 something, so I think she got to our house by like 6:30 maybe. And yeah, it was dark. I just remember her coming, and I remember the gal getting in her car because we got stuff cleared out of the car for her to drive home. I just couldn't believe, her car did not get, stuff got underneath it, but it didn't actually get picked up and moved. We were kind of at the, I guess it would be the northeast edge of the tornado. Stadium Heights, which was at the hill, got hit pretty bad. That was closer to where the buses were, that track. And again, I don't know how much you guys researched the tornado, the pictures of the tornado. They have the overhead, I guess, aerial views. So in my Facebook photo album, I have, this is where I was, this is where I walked, and it really just followed the path of the tornado.
What do you think have been the long-term effects of the tornado?
Xenia, you have that survival, and I think overall the people that stayed, did pretty well. A lot of people that are from Greene County, they kind of rallied together. A lot of people related to each other. I have a lot of classmates that were cousins, and it's pretty typical old farming community that became a city. It was the county seat. Because of the geography with the highways, the interstates, it got kind of cut off when they finished the bypass, 35 bypass, and then later they finished the 675. So Xenia, from what I understand, I think the classes now are between 200 and 300, which is considerably less. There's a lot more older people that's probably stayed there. I think the population hasn't really changed that much. I don't think it's necessarily down, but there's not a lot of young couples with kids, so the school system has probably suffered a little bit of decreased money and funds. But there's areas, the area that grew is out west, was it Progress Drive, and so I have friends that I still go to reunions, and we have a lot of friends that still live there. My only family member that still lives in Greene County is in the nursing home. Unfortunately, 20-30% probably moved out. people that, you know, got displaced, I mean, you know, if you own your home and you had your mortgage paid off and it wasn't worth a whole lot, who knows how much insurance, because there were some places that didn't get necessarily built back. We were very fortunate, you know, having only lived there for 18 months, you know, had insurance on it, because when you have a mortgage, you gotta have insurance. And my dad was able to buy a PEAS package. It's, you buy it prefab, and because he was in the kitchen cabinet construction business, he knew, so we subcontracted and built the house.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was actually a nicer house than we had. Well, with lots of cabinets.
In your family, in the years after the tornado, were there changes as well?
They lived there until '83. My parents did. I moved away at '81. Both my sisters joined the Air Force. So one joined in '79, the other one joined in '81. So my family, direct family, had not lived there. Now I did have some other family members that eventually moved away. My grandparents, you know, deceased, and my parents passed away in '21. So they moved to Columbus, and then later to Texas, and then they moved with my sister. So yeah, in terms of going back to Xenia, they had some friends, but my mom's family was mostly all farm type people, so they lived out in the country away from Xenia. Yeah.
Are there any other details you want to share about your experience or that you've heard?
Well, I think it pretty much, you know, the vivid part's very easy to tell because it never really goes away. You know, like I said, you forget meals, unfortunately, you forget people sometimes, but you don't forget that tornado thing. And as a matter of fact, probably the tornado that hit in 2001, I was actually at a soccer field, and that storm system had passed over us because we lived in Centerville at the time. And by the time we got home, they were talking about this storm, and they still didn't know it was a tornado, but it tracked parallel to the other tornado. And then I work as an urgent care physician, and this last tornadoes we had in, was it, I want to say maybe 2021, 19, 19. Yeah, I was at work in Fairborn and was on 675 going home when I got the warning, because it's at night, and we worked until about 10:30. And so I was being told in my car, the warning system's telling me from my phone to take cover. It's like, take cover, just step on the gas. But the tornadoes, they crossed that area when I had went by. I think there's 4 or 5 tornadoes that. So yeah, you live, you know, it's nothing like Oklahoma or Texas, or I mean, there's places, you know, and there's people that go their entire life and maybe never have a tornado. So it's a shared experience. So when you see pictures, I mean, it can be kind of upsetting to know what people are going through.
Certainly.
Sucks.
Do you think your experience, since you were helping people in the aftermath, helped influence your choice of career?
No, actually, I wanted to be a physician at the advice of my 6th grade science teacher. No, I wanted to be an astronaut, like everybody. In 67, 68, 69, you're going to be an astronaut. And so my teacher noticed, you know, she was a science math teacher, and so she asked me, you know, what I want to be, and she goes, well, I think you could be a physician. You know, I was scared to death of needles, you know, because I had bad allergies and throat, and get shots of penicillin all the time. And she goes, but they'll need doctors in space. She's very slick. Doctors, I mean, I remember, I still remember thinking, yeah. It was weird. Yeah. So did it influence me? I think the helping people, because I did, at that time I actually was a swimmer, and I became a lifeguard right shortly after the tornado, and taught swim lessons. I wasn't sure if I could be a physician because nobody in my family had been a physician. Nurses, had a lot of nurses in the family, when you could just be a nurse after 2 years. So a lot of them weren't college nurses, they were, you know, what we call practical nurses that were trained at the hospital usually. But yeah, I had good enough grades and went on. Yeah, our high school, we went to the old Warner, and the Central High School got raised, and our old high school got raised, so we got bused, and we went to school from 7 to 12. And then the middle school went to school from 12:30 to 5:30. So I did not get to graduate from high school. I graduated from my junior high, and we had some mobile home type things that were set up to extend the classes. But yeah, so I went from being able to walk to high school to having to get on a bus at 6:10 in the morning. So it did change. It gave us a lot of free time in the afternoon.
What did you do with the free time?
I did cross country, wrestled, swam, bowled, and did track. So I had plenty of time to do all that, and then I worked for my dad. Yeah, so.
Was there more than one bowling alley in Xenia at the time?
Nope, just the one bowling alley, and they did rebuild it, and unfortunately they raised it right back down again. So that was a shame. Yeah, I still close to Keith Colosi. His dad was the one that ran that bowling alley during that time period, and he still was like, I just can't believe they built a really nice bowling alley to replace the one that was there. I mean, it was modern and had a lot of modern features, but I think there was a drugstore or something there, like Walgreens, or it's like they tear down a bowling alley to put a. That was disappointing. Xenia has, I think, it's still right. It's still here. It's a little, little Americana feel to it. It's not as modern as probably some. Just like Dayton thinks Xenia's, podunk or whatever term you want to use. Cincinnati thinks the same thing of Dayton. So it's, it goes on, Indianapolis thinks, So large metro areas always think that cities, they're not really cities, New York City, LA, they're the cities, right? Trains, now we got bike trails. So when I grew up in Xenia, there was no 35 that it was Dayton Xenia Road to Dayton. So I can still remember going, because it had a lot of winding, because it followed along the train tracks. And then 675, when I went to Wright State for college, 675 ended at Fairfield Road. So it took them, I think, almost 10 years to finish the southern portion of that. So it went from Fairfield up to 70. It was weird. People used, there was enough of a highway south of North Fairfield that cars get on and do drag racing. And the cops are always trying to keep them from doing that. So Wright State's grown a lot. Wright State, I went to Wright State, all farms. So this area, Beaver Creek was the village when I wasn't a city. But it's grown a lot, so.
So you've seen a lot of change over the years in this area.
So I don't feel like I'm that old, but you start to get there and you start to realize that the ones that you are gone. And so my mom's family, like I said, they've been there since early 1800s. And so my great-grandfather lived to be 102. And he was born about the time that Jamestown was destroyed by a tornado in 1880 something.
1884.
Yep. So he was born in 1884. But he was born at home, so he lived in the Bowersville. I don't know if you're familiar with Bowersville, but 72 crosses the 71, and he owned that section right there. Yep. He went through some changes. Yeah, I just marvel because my son got to see him, so that was his great-great-grandfather. And yeah, he loved listening to the Reds games.
there any other details about your experience you want to share?
About the tornado? Gosh, like I said, I think I told you before we did an interview about my cousin, who's in the nursing home right now. He lived with my grandparents. His parents had died in a car accident, and he would have been, he was the same age as my youngest sister, so 5, what would he be? I was going on 16, so he would have been 10 going on 11, and he watched the tornado from his my grandparents' bedroom. And I said, well, you probably only seen it for about 30, 40 seconds. He goes, yeah, but it was, because we just couldn't believe it. Yeah, it's weird how the people were able to watch the tornado and kind of judge that it wasn't going to come to them. It's like an intuitive, you're predicting the angle, how the tornado is going, whereas the people that were in the way obviously were trying to take cover. We did have one classmate in my high school that died in the tornado. An unfortunate Indian, Asian Indian. His parents, I think his dad taught at Central State, and they had just moved to Xenia within the past year before the tornado, and I just don't think that he knew what it was. He was outside, and he probably wasn't able to get to shelter. But yeah, he's our one classmate we lost. I think my sisters knew the family that lived on Doral. But I didn't really know anybody personally that died. You just know of, yeah, that area changed a lot. Now you got the bike path going through there. That's pretty much it.
Well,
I have one question.
okay.
So you said your mom was at the Dayton Mall?
Yeah, she worked for the credit
Okay.
department, and it's underneath the regular Sears store
Okay.
above. So she was down, and so they had hail. Large hail had hit that area, and so there was already warnings like on the radio about bad weather. So she called my sisters only a few minutes before the electricity went out. So
Did she know what she was coming home to?
well, you remember the communication at that time period is limited. So I'm sure that once she got in her car, she probably was listening to the radio. I never remember her talking much about it. I mean, I think there's always such relief that your family is good, and you see all the other people that lose things, and I just think it's what do we do next? How do I get to work? That summer we had a camper at a campground, which is now underneath Caesars Creek Lake. But we had a camper that my sister stayed at, and so my mom drove from there to work. And the apartment, we only used the apartment in the summer, not much, but we were able to move into our house in October. So 6 months, with my dad, being able to subcontract the house. We probably moved in, I don't think we were the fastest, but we were pretty early. I mean, was it the Corps of Engineers, what do they call it? They come in and they grade the land and stuff. I mean, there was trucks daily that went to Fairborn. I mean, they just trucks with all the debris and stuff. So that's always been because the urgent care that I worked at was very close to that. Yeah, it was off 385, I think. But they had to take a lot of debris, after a tornado. There was just dump trucks going all summer long. They go in and they would grade the ground and get stuff. I was working that summer as a lifeguard and swim instructor, so my dad wasn't real happy with me.
Why not?
Because I usually worked for him. He had a cabinet shop. So I had worked for him since I was 10. So, yeah. So that was a different feel for him. But I went back to work next year because the Y only paid $1 an hour, and he paid $3 an hour. Not too hard of a choice. Especially when you get a car. Yeah, my friends were very jealous because I bought my first car with cash, new car. So I didn't think it was a very wise use of money at the time. But it did last me 10 years.
Were they especially jealous, the ones whose cars had been,
Oh, I don't think we ever really, other than coming out and hearing them, they probably could still drive them, so who cares? You just get them painted. The insurance probably helped pay for it. Plenty of body shop. That was one thing about my dad's cabinet business, because later in the 70s you had high inflation and recession. He had work. We had work, for 2 or 3 years, pretty steady work. It's interesting aside. Yeah, I mean, that's, out of all the things that, I have met some people that said all the things that can happen after, floods and natural disasters, is that technically it creates work and jobs. It's kind of weird, but the reality is, you gotta build back. So the people that are poor enough that don't have insurance on their homes or cars, those are the ones that probably suffer the most.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
Yes. Yeah, it's a shame that, I'm sure it's would have been nicer to have done closer to the time period. I don't know, did they do very many oral history?
They did some at the 40th anniversary, the library did some.
And immediately after,
Right.
in '74, the library did kind of go around and talk to people, so there are some written accounts at the library as well.
Yep, every spring we, my peers, we always, it's not a celebration, it's just kind of a memorial, or what do you want to call it, a remembrance. Yeah, like I said, I kept the schedule, the bus schedule, and the layout of the Beaver Creek High School. They're like, you still have that? Yeah, why not?
A huge part of your life at that point, yeah.
Well, yeah, knowing that you're alive and not hurt. I mean, you really, all people at some point in their life start to realize that things are just things. Yeah, as a physician, you realize a lot. Try to explain to people that it's, all the old sayings. Don't cry over spilt milk. Don't let her. Don't make a fuss about things that are replaceable. People not as replaceable.
Absolutely not. Well, thank you again for your
Thanks.
time.
Yeah, we did good.
Yeah.